We extend hope to everyone who is watching and where we discuss mental, emotional, and spiritual health. And we're just so glad you've taken a few minutes tonight to be with us, to join in the discussion. Tonight, we're going to be talking about reframing love and what that looks like. What do we mean by reframing? I'm sure that you have had pictures that you've reframed. Uh, I'm sure that you know that it involves tearing apart and putting back together again. But I also know that there's a lot about the subject that I really don't know. And so tonight we have our expert panelists, Ben and Taylora Bookie, who are going to talk all about our subject. And we're just so glad that they're able to be with us tonight. And we just pray that you are blessed and encouraged and that your relationships are made strong. God bless you. Ben, take it away, brother.
All right. So we use this word reframe a lot in therapy. We talk about reframing thoughts. So thinking differently about things, thinking about things in a different way that's healthier, more helpful. And so when we're talking about love, we get a lot of information about love from our culture, movies, music, you know, now social media tells us all kinds of things about love and what love is or what it isn't and what we should, expect it to be like. And a lot of it is just wrong information, at least for the Christian. And so, just tonight we're just going to talk about like what love really is from a biblical perspective, you know, even from a therapeutic perspective, what does healthy love look like? And, how does that differ from what maybe we see, in the movies, we see more probably lust than love, but we call it love. And, so is that harmful? You know, Probably, right? And, um, and I think it makes a difference in our relationships and our marriages if we have a good understanding of what love actually looks like, because it probably isn't all fun and just dreamy eyes and I just can't stop thinking about you day and night. Like that's not love per se. So we're talking about what it is and what it isn't. So I don't know if either of you want to kick it off and kind of talk about like, well, what's one thing you've noticed and what is love?
I think part of the one of the things in society is that we start our children on Disney movies, right? Disney movies have been around since 40s, 50s. I'm not exactly sure. They've been around for a while, and a lot of times we believe that our marriages are going to look like Cinderella, getting swept off your feet, being taken out of a awful environment in order to live in a castle. But we are not the prince and princess found in those movies. And so I think it's hard when we have this false image of what really a marriage looks like. The other issue is our society, we don't have both parents in the home. And each parent has a role that plays into what our view of marriage should look like.
It's good.
So if the father isn't in the home, the father is the one that shows us how that a man treats a woman through the mom and how a man treats his daughter by the love he shows there. Also, for the mother shows how a female cares for the husband and how she loves the son or the daughter. So I think that's where there's been a big breakdown in our culture.
If I may, I think that there are a lot of people that have a hard time separating fantasy and reality.
Yeah.
And the Disney movies are great fantasy. but little girls growing up on them see them as somewhat realistic. And
Yeah.
those girls see whoever, obviously, I haven't watched a lot of Disney movies. I did watch some of the girls, but the heroine or the gal that is saved by Prince Charming, whoever it may be, Cinderella or whatever, Snow White, they become what we call archetypes, something, a fixed image in our mind of what we think it really is all about. Now, hopefully, as a person grows up and they mature, that bit of fantasy uh, has sunlight that comes to it and we see it more realistically. But there's one thing that happens to, I think, most people that mystifies us, and that is when we fall in love and the other person reciprocates, it's hard to believe that that person chose us.
Yeah.
That is that's where the drama comes from.
Right.
You hear it in the songs. I was all alone. I didn't have anybody, and you came into my life, and I'm not complete without you. And of course, country music or popular music, those aren't good places to get your concept of love any more than the internet is a good place to get your
Mhm.
psychiatric help.
Right.
However, I do think that you're overwhelmed when it happens. When you are in love, you are instantly overwhelmed with a pile of hormones that just come rushing in on your brain and throughout your being, and you don't think clearly. And so, where does it go? It goes back to that first impression of the fantasy of the princess and the prince, and we set ourselves up to be uh, to be let down. And so, yeah, I think it's realistic actually that people lose themselves in it. But the funny
Mhm.
thing is, and if you're in love uh, for more than a few months, you realize that love is a verb, it's an action, it's a thing we do, it's not something that we feel. And when we feel love and we feel loved by another person, that is such a reward. It is a selfish thing
Mhm.
because we want it to come back to us also, right? But
Mhm.
love is an action, it's something we do. Actually, it's framed in the New Testament as charity. And that means there's a charitable giving. Love is a giving of oneself and one's possessions to another person. So those two things stand out in my mind. Ben?
Mhm. Yeah, and I was thinking when you were talking about that. I mean, we need that romantic attraction, like when we look at like all the we have the word love, but like we talk a lot at church, really like there's all these Greek words for love, and we usually talk about agape love because that's used in the New Testament. It really is an important love, and it's really the love that mature love that we are seeking. It's the love that God has for us. But eros, erotic, right? We get the word erotic from that. Like that love is important too, but we can't sustain love on that. Um, and so when we talk about all of these things, yeah, like how are you going to find somebody if you don't see this woman and you're like, oh wow, like she makes my heart flutter or whatever. And we need that. We need the physical attraction. We need all of those things to start this process. Otherwise, you're never going to find anybody if everybody you look at you're like, right? But we don't sustain love on that. And when we talk, you're talking about love is charity, right? I mean, of course, we always go to First Corinthians 13. We use it at weddings. We use it, really, it's because we always call it the love chapter, right? But I was looking in my the study Bible I have, and it was listing what love is in that chapter, and that's not like a lot of this isn't fun. Like love suffers long. That sounds terrible. Love is kind. No, okay, not bad, but it's still an action. It requires something of me to be kind because that probably means that the person I'm with was doing something that I didn't like or that was unkind. Love does not envy, but rejoices when others succeed. That's hard. Love does not parade itself, is not puffed up. Love does not behave rudely or impolitely. Love does not seek its own, but always seeks to benefit others. That's hard. Love is not provoked, but will allow differences of opinion in minor matters. Love thinks no evil, but makes allowances for other people's flaws. Love does not rejoice in iniquity, but rejoices in the truth. Like, that doesn't sound fun. So, so how do we do this, love? like, like 1 Corinthians 13. I mean, how do we do that? Because that's
Very
not just
careful.
like ooh, feelings, right?
Yeah. I have a scripture here too that I've always enjoyed reading this one because it's in the book of Proverbs, Solomon's writings, and it's the 30th chapter and the 19th verse. And it presents the other side of love, and it presents it with a great comparison. It says, there are three things that are too amazing for me, four that I do not understand: the way of an eagle in the sky, the way of a snake on a rock, the way of a ship on the high seas, and the way of a man with a young woman. And he was talking about mysteries. You have a snake on a rock. What's mystical about that? Have you seen its legs? No, no. So it's just
Mm-hmm.
what he was saying. It's just a mystery. How that one day you wake up and you go to work and you're just doing your job, and then there she is, and you would behave in an unnatural way. You would leave your job behind and you would go for that woman. And so it's that mystery. It's as though Solomon was gazing upon the beauty of nature, the wonders of nature, and then he compared it to the way of a young man with a young woman.
I
Mm-hmm.
once heard someone say, marry someone you can live with, not someone you can't live without. And I
Mm,
think, like what you were talking about, it's kind of like that. Oh, this, what's the word I'm looking for? Like this big love, this passionate love, this desiring love. But what if it is this love that just combines all of those loves? That love, like you love your family, the love like you know, you have that erotic and that agape love where you just want to give up everything and just go away with them. And I think it's so much of all of those things.
it is. Yeah, there's room for all of it. It's not an either or. You
Mhm.
know, we I think all of us as humans feel brotherly love, phileo. We know what that's about. Um, the story of David and Jonathan, that was such a deep brotherly love. Christ clearly attempted to create that sort of love among his disciples, a brotherhood, a fellowship that is unlike anything else. And that was to be the model for the new church, for the beginning of the church, to love one another and in a brotherly way, in a wholesome and in a heavenly way, to care for one another, to be charitable, to be giving. I said a while ago that, there's the noun and there's the verb. And I don't mean to say that love is not a noun, because it certainly is, but it is also a verb, and it's the working together of those two that gives us a completeness about how we observe love at work. Because love, we're not in control of love. When we're really in love with an idea or a concept, a ministry, a person, it's going to have its way with us. We're going to go. We're going to do. Missionaries going on the mission field and sacrificing their all for the glory of God. It's just pure love that does that. Nobody makes them do that. Pastors, evangelists who make sacrifices, it's just love. It's a motivating factor. So,
Well,
see, the more you talk, the more stuff I get in my automatic speak box.
I think too, like, I didn't know what love was until I met Ben. I really didn't. I didn't understand it. I thought I had like this juvenile way of thinking when it came to love, is that love is butterflies. Love is, and guess what? I'm here to tell people sometimes you don't feel those butterflies. Sometimes you say, if you chew that loud again, you start getting flustered and frustrated. And I think that's where we have to choose to love in those moments, because I couldn't imagine being in a world without him, or I don't want to ever imagine that. So to me, that's love, because I don't know. It's just
Well, I
he's
think
my
that,
he's my
uh,
best friend. I don't know if I can describe it. Yeah, go ahead.
well, I think you're doing a really good job. I think media presents love, romantic love, like this, that the normal way to fall in love is that a man and a woman see each other and they're attracted to each other. And there's a magnetism that's at work. And it'll be obvious in the way they look at each other and how they want to be around each other. And then the guy will ask the girl out, and then they'll go out to dinner. But before the show is over, they're ripping each other's clothes off and they jump in bed. And that happens. That's just the way of the world. But what we're trying to present is a different way. And there certainly is a place for that, but not with a person you just met. I'm really naive about that, in that if it weren't for television shows, I wouldn't understand it. It's like, yeah, I'm ripping your clothes off and pressing you against the wall, and that is supposed to represent the height of passion which comes from love. And then they show up at the office the next day and they look at each other, this furtive glance, but then they don't act on it or do anything about it. And he goes to her and she says, "That was a mistake." And he said, "No, it wasn't a mistake. That was wonderful." She said, "It's a wonderful mistake." You know. But and so if you go there, I agree with you, Ben, so much. If you go there for your definition,
Yeah.
if you get that, it's kind of a lame definition.
Well, and you're missing all of these steps, right? Like, how do you really bond and know this person when you already are engaging in, we call it intimacy for a reason, right? Because this should be something that's intimate, that's so close, and we're skipping all of those steps. Like this, if you don't know this person, right, why would you want to be intimate with them? And and it's easy to say, like as an adult, like who's married, like, oh, well, like, I don't have a problem telling you, I did not have sex until Laura and I were married, and I'm glad that for that. And I was, I settled early on, like that was what it was going to be,
That's
as
great.
a young teenager, like that, that was important. God didn't design sex he designed it for pleasure. I mean, there's a whole book in the Bible, we could call Song of Songs, Song of Solomon, whatever you want to call it. You could call it the Song of Sex. I mean, that's pretty much what it's about. But, God loves sex. He created it. I mean, he talks about it in the first few chapters of the Bible. So it is important. But he designed it for marriage, and that's not popular in our world. I get that. And, is it easy, to not have sex? It's really not. And I don't think we do young people any favors by just like, well, just don't do it. There's got to be a deeper spiritual biblical reason for them. And, part of it is in this topic we're talking about. It's like, what does true love really look like? And, so it's such a thing though, but it's not, but that's because we confuse all of these kids with what love is. I don't know how many people I've talked to, like, sex is dating. It's just part of dating. And that's, how do we need to redefine that, reframe that for people that no, that's not what it's about.
I think that happens automatically when people are attracted to each other in a bar. I'm
Mhm.
not a prude, but at the same time, if you go to the bar and you meet a woman and you're drinking, chances are you're going to wind up in the hallway of your apartment complex, ripping each other's clothes off and pushing them
Mm-hmm.
against the wall, because that's always the backdrop.
Yep.
As they were at a bar.
Mm-hmm.
And as uh, Jim Gaffigan says, he said, why is it that alcohol is the only thing in our diet that it's okay for us to like gasp at? So you want a beer? No, why not? You gave up beer? What? He said that never happens with mashed potatoes. What? You gave up mashed potatoes? I can't believe it. So it only happens
Mm-hmm.
to a drink, only happens to
Yeah.
alcohol. So I think there's a real connection there. I mean, alcohol is so important in our culture. And I'm not suggesting that you can't enjoy a drink every now and then, but um, when it becomes part of what motivates your senses to behave in a way that's inconsistent with good logic and and sex with someone that you meet at the bar is about that moment. It's just that moment. Alcohol and pornography are two contributing factors that have messed our culture up tremendously.
So true.
And yeah, so
Yep.
I
Mm-hmm.
want to read. Oh, it's okay. I wasn't sure. Wasn't trying to interrupt you. So I have it's New Spirit Filled Life Bible, and so there's these little things
oh,
in
you're
it.
gonna pull the Holy Ghost on us, huh?
I'm doing it. I'm doing it. And this Kingdom Dynamics, but I want to read to you what it says in it. Now, this is from Ephesians 5:21 through 32, where it talks about the husband and the wife. It says, the hope for marital health, women in God's design, right? Within marriage, the compassion, or I'm sorry, if I can read. Within marriage, the companion truth of mutual responsiveness to the New Testament elaboration of Genesis 2:23 and 24 is pivotal today. Ephesians 5:21 through 32 reveals submission and cleaving as bookends of the same truth. Because she was taken for man, which is Genesis 2:23, therefore the man, husband, is to cleave, be joined to his wife, and she is to submit to him as her head. But it's because, where does it say? Without both sides in place, the structure for the family church topples over. Furthermore, order is not all there is to this point. It's about relationship interdependency. And it's saying because she was removed from his ribs, right? So why wouldn't the man want his rib? You know what I mean? Like, that piece of his body, he's cleaving to it. So I thought that was kind of neat. I don't know if I read it right because I started overreading, and I do that. I'm pretty good at overreading, but sometimes I just mispronounce words a little bit. But that's about it.
It's your turn,
Hello.
Ben. I'm looking
So,
up. I'm looking up a scripture. So anytime you see me looking down or away, I'm looking for
You're
something
looking,
that
resting
looking.
your eyes.
Yeah.
where
You're resting your eyes.
my interest was piqued by something you said.
So, and I think it's interesting, because that made me think when you were talking about that, though, that, when we look at, what love is, I mean, in Genesis, when he talks about Adam and Eve, he's like, Adam knew Eve. And that's the same word that the Old Testament uses about how God knows us. So he's, for Adam and Eve, talking about them having sex in there, but that's that intimate knowledge, that intimate connection, that relationship. It's that same one that God has with us. and that Adam and Eve had. And how important is that, in our just, when we think about love, like that's one of the things that, you know, wow, like Talora actually knows me, and like no one else does. And so, like obviously, like my mom and dad know me pretty well. I mean, they've been around my whole life. Um, but they don't, they're still like, they don't know me like my wife does, and how important and beautiful that is.
Yeah, it really is. I think the willfulness to use that word about knowledge uh, brings with it a thoroughness. That when you're really giving yourself to another human, you are making yourself vulnerable. And uh, vulnerability is not a safe place to be. The word vulnerability suggests that you're putting yourself in a position where you could be hurt. And I think that's why we make it so much about the physical, because we can ignore the other part, or we can know that person in a lot of other ways before we open ourselves up completely. So when you give yourself to another person and you say, you know me, you know all there is to know about me, and you now have that power over me. So if I begin to act out of character, you'll be the first one to see it, and you'll be the one to help me. Because we act out of character a lot. We act out of character when we're fearful.
Mm-hmm.
We act out of character when we've been really successful in a moment and people are patting us on the back. That's not who you are. I mean, if we let that go to our heads, we just act with a different part of who we are. But a spouse will always bring you back down to earth. And I don't mean in a bad way. I mean, ultimately, you're going to have to come back to earth anyway, because not everybody will feel that way about you. But does that make sense? The vulnerability of love, to say, I'm open to you. Because a lot of times, and we talked about this several weeks ago, a lot of times I hear people talk about vulnerability and transparency as though those are interchangeable terms, but they're not. They don't even mean anything close to each other. Transparency, you can see through it. Vulnerability, you can see completely, and you can hurt that person. And Jesus made himself vulnerable to those he knew,
Mm-hmm.
but he didn't make himself vulnerable in that same way to the Pharisees and the Sadducees.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. But maintaining it. I have a pastor friend in Ohio. He pastors, he has 3 campuses, a couple thousand people maybe. Beautiful church. He's been there for 40 years. Wonderful ministry. And I have watched him be hurt by people, watch staff members have to be replaced because of moral failure, or somebody that takes the knowledge that they have, for instance, intellectual property, and steals it. An employee would do that. And I have watched him be hurt over and over again, and yet he doesn't allow himself to be stiff. He always makes room for tears, he says. And I asked him, I said, how can you be so tender in the face of all that? He said, I have to, or none of this means anything.
Yeah.
I have to stay ready and willing to shed tears for what has happened.
Mm-hmm.
That's love.
Mm-hmm.
I think, the reason why, like you're kind of talking about the betrayal in that relationship, those people that we love that are the closest to us are the ones that can wound us the deepest.
That's
Like
right.
Ben could wound me like nobody else could. I mean, other people can wound me, but not like Ben. And that's why that whole, the whole adultery, the whole don't be looking at another woman, with lust and those kind of things, is because for women, it's so important to feel that love, to feel that acceptance. I mean, after all, I've been taken from his rib, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I think, it's, that's why, I mean, when we talk about all of these things with love, why we shouldn't be so callow and careless with our love, whether it's in the beginning when it's just that physical attraction or a friendship or anything else, but as this grows into this mature romantic love, which a lot of people really don't get to that mature part, right? They may get to the romantic part, but they don't get to that mature love that's described in Scripture. But this is why we have to be so careful with it. I think that's why it's so important when you look at things about the action verbs, the verbs about love, why it talks about love that way. Because it's not just that feeling. Now I won't sing the song because everybody's going to think it now, right? Because it's more than just a feeling. It's which our
I
feelings
can
are.
think of rock songs for everything you guys are saying. More than a feeling. I want to
I
know
know
what
everybody was going to think it.
it is.
So
Sorry, I
when
interrupted.
everybody
I
doesn't
shouldn't let that
know,
moment pass.
I wish we could record what happens before we go live, because Thor was the one singing up until we went on, and Ken's like, "Shut up!" You didn't say shut up. Basically, like, be quiet. We're going to go live. But so the two ADHD people, always are going to burst out in a song, right? It's their superpower. So so let's flip the conversation, because we're heading toward this, and because we've been talking a lot about marriage and love, but when we reframe love as, what about outside of marriage, or what if you're single? Like Paul was single, but he still talked about marriage, but he's like, better to be single so you can serve the Lord like I do, right? But so what does love look like? How is that different from what the world says? I mean, Ken, you were touching on it already about when talking about your friend. So, how does love act differently in the world, even if you're as a single person?
If I understand your question correctly, and please stop me if it's obvious that I'm not understanding it clearly. I think that secular culture will predominantly, as it pertains to relationships, will predominantly fall in the category of sexual attraction and activity. So much so that a man and a woman who don't know each other begin working in the office. They're cast as people who couldn't break the spell of lust, and it's called love. Um, with the culture, what I believe is better called the spirit of the age, the motivating spirit that guides and controls the way we think and behave, and what is evident in the culture. I think that there's a seduction to it. The Bible tells us in Paul's writings that in the last day there will be seducing spirits, uh, spirits that entice you into itself. And that's why you see it everywhere. That's why sex sells everything. And hey, look, don't get me wrong. I love sex. Don't get me wrong. I'm not a prude. But if I want to live according to the culture of the kingdom of God, it will be diametrically opposed to the culture, the spirit of the age. And when Paul said, don't let the world mold you into its own shape, Romans 12:1, don't let the world take you like a lump of clay and make you fit its paradigm. Don't do that. Know who you are. Stand your ground. But I will say this, The spirit of the age is very powerful. And unless you open your heart completely to the Lord, and even then, the spirit of the age will pull at you and draw you away. Um, so I think that the culture sees, and again, I use the word culture loosely, but I think it's always about sex. And then if two people don't get married, it's friends with benefits, or it's just platonic, or, you know, in other words, it's defined every way except marriage. And the spirit of the age is working very hard to allow the laws of the land to reframe marriage. The Bible said, without any qualification, for this reason, a man shall leave his father and mother, and a woman will leave her home, and the two shall become one flesh. And that's the mystery of marriage to which Christ likened his relationship with the church. So I was having lunch with a friend, fellow pastor, here a while back, and I hadn't seen him in a while. And it was on Main Street, and it was 2:45 in the afternoon, which means the high school had just let out, and it's just down the road. So I really love this brother. He's been a good friend for a lot of years. And when we parted ways, we hugged each other. And those teenagers acted exactly like teenagers. They said, "Kiss that guy. He's a queer." I mean, all kinds of stuff. It's craziness. And we looked at each other and said, "Yeah, you know, it's the world. It's where the world is."
Mhm.
So I don't know if that answered your question or helped to define that a little bit, but it's how I see the possibility of being friends and being celibate. It is almost non-existent, which is why singles ministry is so hard in churches. You know, it's really difficult, and which is why you see so many pastors have moral failures. And part of it is that the Lord understands it, and He's given us a way. You know, as John said, I write these things to you so that you will not sin. But if you sin, we have an advocate with the Father, Jesus Christ the righteous. But John also said, if a person keeps on sinning, you keep on sinning. Well, the problem is, and I heard a Christian spirit-filled counselor say this the other day, and I didn't react. I just thought I'm going to need to meditate on that for a while. She said that all love is God's love because God is love. You've heard that before? So
Mhm.
Have you heard that phrase? All love is God's love. What does that mean? I don't know. I don't know what that means. I know where it's going. It's going to the place of, because God is love, then if love is out there, it's a God thing,
Yeah.
which I believe is why it may feel right to attach sexual activity to love all the time. And if it's sex, it's love.
Mhm. And it's hard, because that's such a prominent thing that we hear now. All love, all love is God's love, and but we also know, Satan is the father of lies, and all Satan can't create. All he can do is mimic and distort what God does, and Satan distorts love, because if I'm going to carry that all love is God's love to the conclusion that people want it to go, there's a whole society that promotes adults loving children and not loving them as we should love our children, but loving them in a sexual way. And they
Right.
will tell you that they love children and try to make it sound like it's a good thing. But, taking like how, our spirit of the age, our culture wants to take that, well, take it to its conclusion. And because not all love is God's love, at least as they're speaking of it. And because love is also holy. And one of the books I always liked is Gary Thomas, Sacred Marriage. Like, marriage is sacred, but like love, true love is sacred. And good book. I do recommend most of it, not all of it, but you know, that's part of having that our having discernment, and having discernment in relationships even. Like, I mean, you were talking about that. Like, how do we do that? And Jesus is a good example, right? I mean, he was surrounded by his 12 disciples a lot of the time, but clearly Jesus had friends who were female, and those that was he loved his friends. He loved Lazarus. He loved Mary. He loved Martha. Uh, there was nothing unholy in that love. And how do we model ourselves to have that love like Jesus had? And that's a tall order. I know a lot of people, who are single, and maybe they're called to singleness, like Paul was called to be single. Maybe they really want to get married and just haven't at this point. But how do you maintain holy love in all of that? And it's a challenge, I think.
In Ephesians 5, which is right after the scripture what Ken was talking about, where he says the man leaves his father and mother and joined to his wife. It says, this is a great mystery, but it is an illustration of the way Christ and the church are one. He was describing the marriage relationship and how it looks as Christ loves the church, right? That bride of Christ. What did Jesus do for the church? He died. He gave his life. He even up into the time that he died, he still sacrificed himself, and he could have denied it. I mean, remember the 40 days the devil was following him around and telling him, do this, do that. He could have wiped it all out. He wouldn't have had to deal with it, but he chose to die for the church. And that's not saying that my husband should choose to die for me, but in those...
I probably
Well,
would.
I think so. I think when you say I do, if it's before God, you're saying you take a bullet for your
Yeah.
spouse.
Mhm.
I know I
Yeah.
did.
Yeah.
You took a
I
bullet for
thought in
Kitty?
those terms. If they're firing and my wife's there, I'm going to knock her down and I'm going to get in the way of that bullet,
Hmm.
And I do want to qualify this one thing. I think that what we're talking about is a real sensitive subject for a couple of reasons. One, because, well, for several reasons, and you referred to it a moment ago, Ben. We may have people watching who were sexually abused as children.
Yeah.
And if that was the case, there was something in them that was awakened.
Mm-hmm.
And even though that child can't understand or explain what they feel or what happened to them, when they see sex portrayed in the world, even though it may not be with a minor, now that becomes synonymous with love. Love looks like this. So I want to say that because there are just a whole lot of people who have had really unfortunate experiences in their early years. And what we're saying right now is very confusing to them. And what I want to say is we're not saying you're not eligible for love. We're not saying that you aren't, that there's something inferior about you because you had that experience. That's not the case at all. What we're talking about is how we can reframe it and make it into what the Lord wanted it to be. But then also, you have a lot of churches. I mean, you have a lot of churches that just turn their eyes to sexual sin. And they do that because they want to be accepting and they want to be loving and they don't want to be seen as a stupid church, that isn't in touch with the times. Well, there's nothing about the times and sex that's unique. Sex has been around since the beginning of time and it was difficult to manage back then. I mean, Adam gave it all up for some sex, he did. He lost the whole ranch, so to speak. So again, we're not out of touch. I think if there's anybody that's in touch, it's people who counsel people every day or pastors, bishops who pastor pastors. I get it. Elijah was a man subject to like passions. He felt what we feel. And Jesus was subject to like passions. His response was different. So I just wanted to clarify that in case, because it's so easy for the devil to just throw in your mind, see, you're worthless. See, it was your fault back then, and it's your fault now. You may as well pursue whatever it is you want to pursue. And so, and it's a huge question. It's a very it's an all-encompassing issue because we are created as sexual beings and as spiritual beings. But you can't spiritualize your sexuality. When you try to spiritualize your sexuality, I know of a well-known evangelist, loved the Lord, wanted to serve God, pure-hearted, didn't know what to do with his sexuality, and so he tried to spiritualize it by putting himself in a pseudo spiritual trance and then saying that God authorized him to have sex with this man or to kiss that man. But you can't do that. You turn the hose on and you're going to get water. You twist that dial and it's going to work. And the Lord didn't intend for us to be unfulfilled, unhappy. He did not make you to not have sex. That is the exception and not the rule. The rule is he made man, he made woman. He said it's really good. So see you next week. Take a honeymoon.
Ken, thank you for bringing that up too, because that was one of the reasons, my sexual abuse is one of the reasons why, my love was perverted, as in, not waiting till I got married because I didn't understand. I was just a kid. I didn't understand what love was. And you're right, it gets attached to sex. And it also it just changes the mindset, and you feel like that's how you have to earn your love. Which toppled into being in an abusive relationships too. You feel like you deserve it. Like you were saying, you feel like this is what I deserve. I did something wrong, because the victim ends up being the problem. It's not the perpetrator. So we take it out on the victim, and then the victim begins to feel like they're worthless. There's something wrong with them. And so they just seek love however they can find it.
I think it's important too to point out that even if whatever has happened, right, I don't have to continue in that, right? I can change that at any point. With it's not something we necessarily do on our own. I mean, that's why we have therapists, we have pastors we go to, we have people in our church to support us, because these are difficult things, and when we're trying to reframe how we've thought about love or sex or friendship or anything, and to make it into something that God intended, that's not an easy task. It'd be nice if we got saved and boop, everything's perfect now, and it's not that way. So unless maybe like you were the thief on the cross who got saved and then died pretty soon, shortly after, that's maybe an exception. So got perfect for him pretty quickly. But for most of us, we're still on this earth. And, so we're made holy. But we're still in that tension of, I'm not there yet. And what does that look like? And how do we do that? And getting that help to do that and not thinking we have to do that on our own, or that we have to be ashamed of it, or carry around all of this guilt about it, when Jesus already paid for all of that. And so let's move into move closer to what Christ wants for us and has called us to.
Absolutely. I think that this is a good time to remind everybody why we do what we do here. The gathering place is a place that offers hope. If you've listened to a part, if not all, of what we've said tonight, you might come away thinking that we're opposed to the way you express your sexuality. Well, it really doesn't matter what our opinion is about that. What really matters is that you know that we love you. Even though we've never met you, it's the love of God that works in us, and we appeal to you in the name of Jesus to understand the greatest love, the love of God. And so, even though we're talking about a complex and somewhat difficult subject, and one that is easy to misunderstand and therefore disregard, I would want you to know that, man, we're glad you watch. We're really glad you watch. And it may sound like this isn't true, but it doesn't matter what your lifestyle is, whether you're heterosexual, homosexual, queer, LGBTQ plus, minus, add a few others, because it's growing every day. And what it's about, it's identity. And I say that respectfully. It's about identity. It's about understanding who you are in light of what the culture says, in light of what other people say, and how you feel about yourself. So we're not judgmental. We're instructive, and there's a big difference. Being instructive means that we come to you believing that we can provide help for your weariness, but not with condemnation or judgment at all.
Yeah, and when I talk to people so often, sometimes I think they have this feeling of like, I've been seeing you for 2 months, like why? And I've actually had people say like, you must be so disappointed in me because I'm still I'm like, I'm not. Like usually I'm like, it's only been 2 months. Like, give yourself some grace on this, because we don't change quickly.
No.
And so like that's why I'm like, there's no, I mean, there is, people do feel shame. I understand that, but like we all three of us, and Tom and Kevin, like we want you to have those people who are like, you know what, like, I'll carry your shame with you or for you in this, because you don't need that burden. Like let's lift that. And there is hope. And hope is that expectation that something will happen. And so when I'm expecting something, that doesn't mean it happens right away, because if it happened right away, I wouldn't be expecting it. It would already be here. And so thinking about that hope that way is like, it's coming, and I know it's coming, and it will take as long as it takes. And man, I've got Ken alongside me, I have Laura alongside me, or Tom, or Kevin, or any host of people. We had Amy on a couple of weeks ago. I mean, there's somebody. We're gonna have Lisa on next week. I mean, we've had so many people that that have been on here, or people that we know that really do love you, whoever you are. and doesn't they love you, and there is somebody who wants and would be honored to come alongside of you.
Ben, have you ever read the book by John Irving, Prayer for Owen Meany?
I have. It's a good
Isn't that a
book.
great book? I love
Good
that
book.
book. But the movie, have you read it, Laura?
I don't
Novel?
think so.
It's on the
It's
bookshelf.
awesome.
You can
So,
get it.
but there's a movie that was created, taken loosely from that book called Simon Birch. And little Simon Birch was a little guy, and I'm not going to go into explaining the whole movie, but in this particular scene, Simon Birch, or if it were the book, Owen Meany, he has this crazy crush over this girl, and it's a Christmas play. And since he's so small, they made him baby Jesus. But that doesn't mean he's underdeveloped in any other way. And she comes down as Mary, bending over to whisper sweet words to baby Jesus, and all that Owen Meany or Simon Birch can see is her cleavage and down her dress. And he yells out, "Sex makes people crazy!" And that's my closing remark. Sex makes people crazy.
It does too.
So, for those that think we're too spiritual, I just needed to bring that up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And now some people think we're not, but
Right. Yeah.
we are authentic, if not. So,
Well,
but yeah,
Ben, you want to say anything in closing?
No, I think what I said before, that stands. I mean, there's hope, and there are people who love you and will, no matter what. I don't care where you are or who you are. There are people that will walk alongside of you, and help carry some of that, and be patient and love you. And then I know we're having a special guest next week, so I'm gonna let when Talora talks to kind of introduce that for everyone too.
It's up to you, Laura.
So I think I don't know what I think right now. My brain just went. So, but we, as you know, as humans, right? We do understand love, but we may have a shaded view of love, so that it's not. I have no idea what I'm talking about. Right now.
Could you tell us your website again, Laura?
Yes, thanks, Kim, for wrapping that up.
You've all been there.
My brain just stopped. So, our webpage is quiescecounseling.com. And then Lisa Gonzalez will be with us next week. Lisa is a great lady I met quite a few years ago. I'm not even sure how long ago it was, but she has such a powerful testimony. And we're going to talk about, in the marriage world, being with someone in sickness and in health. So it's a phenomenal testimony. It's powerful, and I just would encourage you to be here. And then I wanted what I was getting to earlier. I was trying to talk about how our relationship reflects how Christ loves the church. And in the marriage, we need to not see our spouse as an enemy, but see him or her as a partner, as one that, like Ben was saying, that does come alongside us and that loves us even in our faults. I can honestly say this, that Ben is the first person I was ever able to just be me. Be me. I laugh now. I joke now. I act silly, and he still accepts me. And that's what I want for everyone in their marriage, is not to act silly, but for someone that accepts them for who they are.
Thank you, Laura. I really appreciate both of you. You are the gathering place. Without you, it'd be very difficult to do this week by week. And I want you to know that I appreciate you and I find great joy in spending time together with you online. If you want to reach these fine folks, QUIES, QUIES, Christian Counseling Services, is that what it is?
Yeah.
.com.
And it's
And if you want to reach,
quiescounseling.com.
okay, quiescounseling.com. We're not Christian anymore, so don't go there. No, I'm teasing. We are. And you can reach me by leaving a message right here on Facebook or YouTube, or you can send me an email at kensheltoninfo@gmail.com. Thank you, and may the good Lord bless you until we see you again next Sunday night at 6 o'clock. Goodbye now.